So have you ever accessed a web page in Chrome, Safari, and all of a sudden you get this weird warning that pops up and it looks like someone's trying to hack your computer? It asks you if you want to advance to an unsecure page. Well, that has to do with HTTPS, and that's what we want to talk to you about today. And my name is Jake. I'm a full stack developer, been doing this for about 10 years or so, and I've worked with a number of different technologies, and I'm here hanging out today with my friend Chris.
What's up, everybody? My name is Chris. I am a beginner developer. I have exactly 0 years of coding experience. I'm just getting into it through free classes online. And yeah, this is the base case YouTube series. And I guess what we're here to do is try to go over different subjects one by one from a beginner perspective and an expert perspective.
Yeah, and if you guys like this content, feel free to like, share, subscribe. Definitely leave any comments for us. We will read each and every one of them, and we would appreciate any feedback on any topic that we cover, because we are doing this to help people avoid making those mistakes that mostly I have dealt with in the industry so far. So today, Chris, we're talking about HTTPS. What do you know about that?
Really, all I know is just what you said in the intro. Is I know it has something to do with security, and doing a little bit of looking up that I didn't realize that it had to do with encryption. So I know that it has to do with security. I'm not exactly sure what it is, and from a beginner developer standpoint, I would like to know why this is something I should know about, and also why, how is it that I can incorporate that, or when does it become incorporated into my programming?
Yeah, so taking it back to the introduction of this video, HTTPS is the secure version of HTTP. Now, HTTP is an acronym that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And to not get super nerdy, but when you get your internet service provider, and I live in the Carolinas, Chris lives in New York, so I got Kinetic as my internet service provider. Who gives you internet?
Verizon.
Verizon. Okay. So, I mean, wherever you are in different places of the world, different internet service providers, you might see, if you Google online, ISP, internet service provider. So whoever gives you that internet connection to your home, or when you're out on Wi-Fi at a coffee shop or whatever, they give you that access, and then you access the internet through that ISP using a browser. So Chrome, Safari, God forbid, Internet Explorer. Unfortunately, that's being deprecated. And when you access a web page, you are essentially pulling different data packets from the internet service provider, and they're loading different resources into your browser. So your HTML files, your CSS files, your JavaScript files, everything that makes a web page look, feel, is clickable, moves around on desktop or mobile version, that's all being pulled from a external server somewhere. And the protocol that's being used to pull those packets of data from that external server is HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And you want to add that S to the end of it, because it, like what Chris said, it adds that encryption to that data transfer. There's a lot of, especially in 2022 when this video is being made, there's a lot of hacking going on and people just trying to steal data and information. Like, data is huge these days. People are stealing data, farming it, and just selling it out to whoever wants to pay the highest dollar for it. So information is very important, and you want to make sure that the information that you're passing back and forth between websites, your coworkers, people that you work with, email, text, even, it's all encrypted. That information is going back and forth. Otherwise, anyone can really just kind of jump in the middle there, like a what's called a man in the middle attack, and can steal that information if it's just not encrypted. So you want to make sure that that encryption exists. So Chris, does that kind of make sense? I know there's a lot there to unpack.
That was a lot. Yeah. So I could see the points where you were going, right? Like I could see each individual part. But if I'm building a website, right? And we can kind of break that down, each piece what you're talking about. But if I'm building a website and I'm programming, right? I get a little bit more advanced. Is that something that I do personally, or is that like a third party service that I have to pay for them to have that security, that encryption?
Yeah, awesome question. So in order to have that HTTPS encryption of the web site that you're creating, it requires what's called an SSL certificate, secure socket layer certificate, which encrypts those data packets that are being transferred. And it can be a free service and it can be a paid for service. Typically, your web hosting provider, whenever you are creating a website, will provide that SSL certificate bundled in with your hosting package. So, and we could definitely talk about hosting in another video for sure. But when you create a website, you need somewhere to store your web files that people are going to access when they go to www whatever. And those files are going to live on a server somewhere. And that hosting provider, that server where you're storing those files, they'll most likely provide you with an SSL certificate as well to be able to encrypt that information. So yeah, when you store those files on a server somewhere, they will help you out with that server or with that SSL certificate setup. And if you don't have that, that's typically when you see a web page that will show up and give you that warning that says, hey, this is not secure. Do you want to proceed? And a lot of times people can proceed to that page, but it will show up in your very top left on your browser, most likely, that it's not secure. And when that happens, you definitely don't want to input any information.
Right. That leaves you open, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't enter credit card information, don't submit any forms. Like, this site is not secure.
Yeah. So going back and to kind of break this down a little bit at a time so we can follow each step along the way. So I've written a bunch of HTML, I've written a bunch of CSS, I've gotten pretty much everything good to go for my website, right? And it's useless on my machine, except for to me, right? Because my machine is hosting this, not the else, and it's not accessible to everybody. Excuse me. So I've got all these files, right? And you mentioned data packages. I know that somebody out there, right? Somebody out there's got a bunch of servers that I can then send this stuff to, or that they can access through that, right? Instead of, obviously, I don't want the whole internet looking at my machine. So they're going to have it. They have all their protections and security set up. I get that part. Data packages. What are you talking about when you're talking about data packages? Is that just those files themselves, what the website is, what the app is?
Yeah, that really refers to HTTP requests. So once again, going back to the HTTP protocols that are passing those data back and forth. So yeah, when I say packets of data, I essentially just mean data being passed back and forth between your browser, the server. There is a lot of technical jargon that has to do with how the browser actually displays that information, how it paints it within the browser itself. But I think that answers your question to at least say that it's just when you normally run like a speed test, or you're checking different metrics for your website when you actually do upload it to the host. A lot of times it's also referred to as resources that are being loaded for that page. So once again, going back to the HTML, the CSS, JavaScript, all of the different image assets that are going to be displayed on the page. So that's essentially what I mean, is it's just the data being transferred that's actually being displayed. And another video that we could potentially get into is you can have something called a CDN, or a content delivery network, which actually distributes all of these files to different servers. So depending on where you are geographically, you may be able to ping a server that's closer to you, therefore getting the resources loaded faster within your browser.
Right. I've heard of that before. Briefly, I've heard about that before. So is this something that, like you personally, is this something that you have to initialize yourself, right? If you're the one controlling the entire project for a company, is this something you have to go out and seek through whoever's hosting, or what's involved with the like that whole HTTPS process from the beginning? What's the beginning, and then how does it move forward from there?
So if I understand your question, do you mean how do you get set up with the certificate? How do you make sure all the different pages on your website is actually secure with HTTPS, or am I not understanding your question?
No, no, essentially you built everything already, right? All the fun stuff, all the code, all that. You've got everything set up, everything works fine. What's the next step? What do I look for to to get that secured?
You would have to store those web files, the HTML, the CSS, the images, on a secured server that is publicly accessible, meaning I'm going to put this file on a web server that'll be publicly accessible when someone goes to a web page and types in the specific URL that will retrieve that information from that web server. That web server will have the SSL certificate set up on it to ensure that that file is being delivered securely and encrypted. So it's the SSL set up on the actual web hosting side itself. And so you want to make sure that whenever, even if you are retrieving external resources, third-party resources like a JavaScript file for an external library or an image that's hosted outside of your hosting platform, like you have an image stored on a cloud storage like AWS or Dropbox even, you can double check to make sure that those images that you're loading on your web page all have an HTTPS URL. Otherwise, your web page may not display it properly, because when you have mixed, what the browser calls mixed content, loading some that is HTTP and then loading some resources that are HTTPS, you'll run into conflicts where things won't necessarily load properly.
Okay. You mentioned when you mentioned JavaScript, what did you call it again? It was a third party or a mixed content, right? Is that what you call it?
So JavaScript, so third party libraries.
Yeah.
So a lot of times someone would create a website and they'll just have like a static website that, you go to it, you'll see your home page, you'll see your hero section, maybe like a little about blurb of what the page is about, maybe see some cards or carousels, a form, FAQ, whatever, footer. A lot of times companies are going to add third-party tracking scripts. They're going to add third-party like Google scripts that will allow them to add like CAPTCHAs for form submissions. I mean, there's a ton of different types of scripts that you can have, but a lot of times those scripts are third-party scripts, meaning that someone else is providing a service that you possibly are paying for, and you are injecting their scripts that they are hosting in another server somewhere else outside of your server of files, and you are accessing them and adding them within your web content.
So when you use those libraries, specifically like a JavaScript library, right? I mean, using a feature somebody else has built already with JavaScript, and instead of writing out all that code, because I'm sure it could, the higher up the chain you go, I'm sure that could be really super complex stuff. So building that yourself, you could call this library, have access to it. Does that happen every time that basically that reach out to grab that library, when I assume it's your browser runs across that line of code in yours, right? In your site that says, we're using this library over here. Does it have to access that every single time that it goes to reach out for that library? And I ask this for a specific reason. Every time somebody uses the website, does it have to go out and reach out to that third party every single time?
Yeah, Chris, I think this is probably a good discussion for another video because that will have to do a lot with browser caching. So when a browser, just at a really high level, when a browser caches a resource that it's loading for a website, that means that it's loading it once on first load, and then that browser is actually saving it within the browser memory itself. Like your browser actually acts as a client of some sort that will save the information of that script. And so every time that page loads, it doesn't have to refetch it from that external server every time. And there are a number, and once again, I want to stay high level with the caching stuff, but there are a number of different what's called cache policies. May it be a CDN, may it be through your browser, additional plugins if you're using like a WordPress website. There's a number of different ways that you can establish how long a browser actually holds on to that cached resource. So you're not fetching that information every time a page loads.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of stuff to talk about, buddy.
Oh yeah.
I already feel it. Like this is gonna be. There's gonna be a lot. I'm so interested in this stuff, obviously. But hearing that was like, okay, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. Like it's like a bunch of fireflies. Like, which one are we gonna grab?
Yeah. We'll be talking about a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So okay. Is this something that HTTPS, you know, you have a host, right? They're keeping all your stuff on a server. They've got their own protections set in place. You get the something socket. What's that called?
Secure socket layer, the SSL.
Okay. That's all set up. Okay. They say you're good to go. Boom. Now, does that mean that means from that point on, HTTPS is what is on your website? Is it a barrier for your specific local machine? Is it whoever's trying to access the site? Is it blocked there or is it secured there? How does that work? What's the line process?
Yeah, a lot of good questions. So I think to go back to your initial question, once it is activated on the web server, it is not a active for the rest of eternity type of scenario unless it's deactivated. There's actually an expiration date to that SSL certificate. Typically, they could range anywhere from 3 months to a year that they're active, and then you have to renew that certificate because there's a lot of encrypted data in that certificate that is actually being encoded. And once again, just to kind of stay high level here, but the SSL works using these private and public keys. There's these very, very long lines of string text that just looks like a bunch of gibberish, but it's a very long, several lines of just text that are just encoded pieces of data packets and information that are in these different keys. And so how you create this SSL is really just this relationship between the domain, the web server, the domain registrar. There's a number of different pieces of information in this encrypted like key that the SSL uses. So therefore, you have to continue to renew that information just based on the latest information for that website moving forward. I think that answers your first question. Your second question was what again?
I believe I was just getting to what's the in the line of somebody comes to the site that has to go through the host first, and then yeah, where does the security come into that process? Is it on their machine? Is it them accessing servers? Is that where the security happens, or is it built into? Yeah, I guess I'm not sure where that HTTPS quote unquote where that part is. Is it just
Right.
on the servers?
Right. So when a browser user goes to a URL, something.com, they are essentially accessing a web server file directory. They're saying, and all that happens kind of on the back end of the server side because the web server itself is configured via I'm blanking the name of it right now. But yeah, the DNS records. And once again, this is something else that we could definitely talk about. But there on the web server itself, it's configured to say if someone goes to this .com domain, it will come to our web server in this specific file directory, and it will display, or it will serve up to the browser these specific files. So when someone opens up their browser and they type in a .com, a domain.com, whatever, it will then send a request to that web server. That web server then serves up those secure files, because at that point, it is then HTTPS, because the resources that are being served up to the browser, those are the secured, assets, resources that are being loaded in the browser. And that is actually what is HTTPS. It's not the browser, it's not the domain necessarily, it's the content that's actually being displayed in the browser.
So it's essentially the tape on the Amazon box, right? Like, I request this box, the box comes back to me, it's already secured, it's already got all that stuff contained within it. I guess that's probably a terrible example.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
You can still access the contents, but it's secured as it comes to you.
Yeah,
right?
it's a good analogy.
Okay, I got you.
So, Chris, we talked about a lot so far, and I feel like anyone watching this video that is around the same level as you, where you're at kind of in their developer journey, this could be like a lot. How are you feeling so far? And is there something that maybe we could break down even more to help people?
Yeah, that's actually just what I wrote down. Key points to look up,
Hmm.
because obviously this is something that's important, and something that programmers should know about. And it's good to know, right now, even though I have, again, a high level understanding of what this is, right? Not down to a T, but there was a bunch of stuff that you did talk about that I feel like is important to look up, like myself. So I don't know if we're going to do a slide or how we're going to do this or put it on the screen, but if you could, off the top of your head, come up with, I don't know, we covered so many things. What do you think are like the key points that should be looked up just a little bit deeper, even though I'm not there yet? But some things I could just Google, look on Wikipedia, look on, W3 schools or whatever.
Mhm.
I think are some of the key points that I should be looking up just so I have a high level understanding of what those are.
Yeah. So definitely what we've been talking about, step one, HTTP and HTTPS, really the importance of it, how it plays into, in 2022 nowadays, e-commerce is a huge thing. People are buying stuff online all the time, and it's very, very crucial to have websites that have HTTPS. Otherwise, you should not be entering credit card information at all. So just having a basic understanding of why HTTPS is important, why Google and Chrome is enforcing essentially browsers or websites to be HTTPS. Otherwise, they're going to display that warning, and why Google finds HTTPS to be so important. And then digging into SSL, digging into like what we talked about, hosting. There's a number of different hosting providers out there. In no way am I recommending any specific one personally, because it really just depends on what type of website you have or what hosting provider you should pick. But looking at just, if you just type in web hosting, I'm sure Google will show you the top, 10 that have all this information set up. And then you can look on their websites how they provide SSL certificates for all of their web users and their hosting packages. So looking at web hosting, along with web hosting, a lot, you'll see the term cPanel. cPanel is a type of web hosting that a lot of the main hosting providers use, but essentially all it is it's a nice graphical user interface that has all of your different apps that you would need to operate a web server on the back end of it. And that's probably from a high level, really what you would need to look at, from the importance of what HTTP is, mixed content also, like we talked about previously, and how you can avoid that in the future. And that really has to do a lot with conflicts with loading in third-party assets into your websites, like we talked about. I know that's a ton, but really web development, as you know, Chris, it could be a rabbit hole that you just continue to go down. And so that's why we want to have these conversations, so we can really simplify them and break them down as best as we possibly can. But we also want to encourage everyone watching this video to dig in deeper. So I really appreciate that note that you made, Chris, of just like, as you're going through this video, write stuff down. And like, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, what acronym I'm saying, like, Google it. It's not that hard, you know?
I think it's important to, especially for beginners and myself, to remember that this is not stuff I need to memorize right off the bat. I don't need to memorize every single detail of, what the SSL certificate says. It's important to know those high level things first. Of Google it, find out, what are the top 3 web hosting services. Look up SSL certificates, and figure out, what those are, who kind of is talking about them the most, things like that. Yeah, just not to memorize all these things because it's a lot. But as you know, the stuff progresses. You build on it a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and then you just get familiar with it. So yeah. Do
For
you?
sure. And I just also want to piggyback off that real fast too, is yeah, don't memorize this stuff. Like, if you don't have to, because depending on who you work for or what type of projects you work on, if you work for a corporation, if you work for an agency, if you're a freelancer, just retain the information that you need to know on a regular basis. But the stuff that you're going to touch, like, every once in a while, feel free to Google it. Like, a lot of developers out there, they don't remember this stuff. I don't remember this stuff. I've been in the industry for almost a decade now, doing so many different things in the web space, and I don't even remember everything. And it's just because with repetition, you'll actually typing stuff out and continuing to do it over and over again, that's what will ingrain it in your memory, not just reading from Google, not just watching a video on YouTube. Like, you won't retain that information until you actually do it. So you most likely won't retain all of this video, which is totally fine, until you actually set up an SSL certificate on a web hosting provider. That's great. And there's several different ways of actually how you do that as well. They might have you actually generate a CRT token, which is one of those keys that we mentioned earlier that you have to actually manually generate and then put within your hosting cPanel. So like, that could be a thing, or it could just be one click of a button and you pay your web hosting provider, $10 a month to generate the certificate for you. So you don't have to, lose sleep trying to figure out, how do I generate all this types of, encrypted stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds horrifying right now. Absolutely terrible to think about. Yeah, so that was, kind of breaking everything down, figuring out what we need to look at. What do you think, if we can, to wrap this up a little bit, watching throughout how many years, over a decade, that you've been programming?
Yeah, about
Watching these watching the hacks happen, and then more security. They get better, more security, right? It definitely feels like they're trying to improve things to get, everybody safer, right? Make sure nobody's data is stolen, all of that. If you could give me an overarching, what do you think for everybody, especially programmers that are getting into it, what do you think the overarching goal is of HTTPS, and just why do we do it?
Yeah. Overarching goal of HTTPS is to encrypt data being transferred between your internet service provider and your browser. And why that is important is because, as you mentioned, Chris, there are hacks happening on a minute by minute basis around the world. And to be honest, there is no such thing as an unhackable site. All hacks have all websites have vulnerabilities. And what you are, as a website developer, what you are trying to do is make it annoying and difficult for a hacker to hack a website, so then they move on to something else. If you have a resource or something that a hacker wants, you are not immune to being hacked. So I don't want to say that, you know, by having your website secured via HTTPS means that you're going to be, you know, super safe online, that no one can hack your information. That is not true. But there are several different steps that you could take as a web developer and a website creator to make sure that you are secure. And HTTPS is definitely one of those primary things that you should have in place to make sure that your web content is secure.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds good, man. I like that. If I, again, we're kind of working out how we're going to end these videos, but if I could plug something real quick, is for me, my recommendation to anybody, again, I'm a total beginner, so I have a very cursory knowledge of this stuff, but I'm getting better at it, at least on the HTML and CSS side, is I am going through FreeCodeCamp. If you just Google it, FreeCodeCamp, it literally is. Have you taken a look at that, by the way? Have you looked at it?
Yeah, I have in the past. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. It literally, from the very beginning of how to set up just a basic web page, and then it goes through. I'm working on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at the same time. But you can go literally right from the beginning, and it shows you how to just write little pieces of code, shows it on the browser, and then write a little more, and it shows it on the browser. And eventually you get to a place where, okay, I know HTML and CSS pretty well. I could build a front end, you know, easily, and then start very basic JavaScript, little tiny bits of code at a time, and it builds up like that. So I wanted to plug that because that's what I've been using, and it has been incredible. I can just log in, do a little bit of code at a time while I'm at work. You know, anytime I get a break, I can just log in, do one little lesson, and if that's all I got time for, boom, it's done. 5 minutes, and I have learned something new each time. So I just wanted to plug that real quick. Hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I'm glad you actually found a tool that actually helps, because I know that, you know, you attempted the school route, and as you know, Chris, I'm not one to be an advocate for school myself. I went to school. I didn't go to school for development, and I had to figure out development on my own by essentially being thrown into the deep end at a very large hospital, and kind of figured my way out, figured my way through daily. It was a very stressful scenario. So I'm glad that you were able to find a tool that is practically teaching you how to do this stuff.
Yep. Free, and it's fun. So
yes.
right.
Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope that is helpful. Once again, if you have not subscribed to our channel, we are going to be releasing new content. I'm believing around every month or so. That may be more frequent as time moves on. But if you are looking to get notified whenever me and Chris come out with a new video, please like, share, and subscribe. Click that bell to be notified when we post a new video. We are looking forward to hearing your comments, feedback. We love it. We will read each and every one. Thanks for watching.